talk a little bit about my Iboga experience. I've actually taken Iboga twice, and the first time was in Gabon in West Africa. I went through an initiation into the Bwiti tribe. Having said that, my own experience was a difficult one, and in some ways a kind of amusing encounter with this culture. But yeah, basically, I got fascinated with psychedelics when I was in my late 20s, and I began to get assignments from different magazines, and I got an assignment from a hip-hop magazine to go down to Gabon and go through this Iboga initiation. And one aspect of this substance they were particularly interested in was its use as an addiction interrupter. And I wasn't really addicted to anything as far as I knew, but as you know, as I had this experience, it definitely suggested that there could be, you know, help in these types of areas. Yeah, I went down to West Africa. I met a botanist who'd been working with this tribe. He was a white Jewish guy from South Africa, and we went down to from Libreville, which is the capital, to Lambaréné. And then out to this tribal shamanic village where this king Mutombo presided over this session. You know, the initiation had a series of stages. They sort of took me down to this river. They played their Bwiti music. I got undressed. I got sort of rebaptized in their little stream. And then they kind of covered me in this paste, and I put on this tribal garment. And then they fed me an enormous amount of this Iboga powder. Which was the most disgusting thing that I'd ever tried to eat. It was like sawdust mixed with battery acid or something. And you know, but I really wanted to have this visionary experience and like come all this way, you know, so I just kept gnawing away at this horrible stuff. And you know, finally the shaman said, you know, okay, you know, he's eaten a lot, it's good, you know. So then we went into their temple, which was just this kind of cement building with an Iboga plant at the entrance and some statues. And they sort of sat me in front of a mirror. And it was clear that they had these different phases of the ceremony. And that they, you know, the shamans and the whole tribal group obviously had a very deep knowledge of this plant and how it works in the different phases of the experience. So basically there were kind of like three main phases of the experience. There was a kind of open-eye, visionary phase where you're in front of the mirror. And then there's a sort of lying down phase that was many hours, I would say, where they were singing and drumming, and I was going through all these sort of personal recollections and sort of looking at my life, you know, up to that point. And then the last phase is they got me back up on my feet and they had me dance with them and drum with them and so on. And you know, it had many phases. When I first sat in front of this mirror, I saw my face turning into a baby, into a skull, into an old man. I saw this kind of window in this mirror appear, and in this little window I could see like black and white projections. So I saw my apartment in New York, which looked very boring. It was just like, you know, my plants, my windowsill and stuff. Then I saw a street in the city with people crossing it. So later I asked the shaman, like, why did I see this stuff? You know, and he was like, oh, well, you know, it was just a check-in. It was showing you your home, it was showing you that everything was tranquil at home. So then I saw this wooden statue came sort of walking through the room and sat next to the shaman and kind of leaned over and put its, you know, hand on its chin like this and kind of leaned forward curiously. And so the statue looked kind of like a golem-like figure, this kind of rough-hewn wood statue with these different sort of, you know, branches or something. Or tree limbs. And after the ceremony, I asked one of the shamans, so who is this guy? You know, what does that mean? And they were like, oh, you know, that's the spirit of Iboga who's coming to, you know, open the door and begin the initiation. You know? So it was kind of like any question I had for them. You know, they had the terrain mapped out, and they knew, you know, what these things signified, and so on. So then during this. Lying down and closed eye phase, and there were some other open eye visions. During the lying down phase, I went really through my life, and it was almost as if there was a kind of guiding intelligence or some kind of other consciousness that was taking me through a kind of life story, you know. And it was almost like my life was this kind of holographic projection that it was showing me different aspects of. And it showed me specifically times of great emotional turmoil and stress. So it showed me my parents separating when I was a child, and them like yelling at each other and getting into fights, and then the sort of serious illness I had when I was young, and being in the hospital. And it just gave me the sense of how these different events had kind of impacted my psyche and shifted my development. And then I was shown, when I got older, there was a phase where I was shown my use of alcohol. And I was part of this kind of journalist, literary, kind of art world, media cocktail party scene in New York, and there was a lot of drinking, and I was just shown in these sort of repeated tape loops of myself drinking at different cocktail parties, like drinking, getting drunk, going home, collapsing, not working, it was really showing the negative effects that alcohol had been having on my psyche and on my life. And it did it in such a way with this kind of sardonic, undercutting humor to it, and just by repeating it over and over again, I got the message. And I would say that after that experience, I did actually cut down significantly on alcohol use ever since. And I don't think I was addicted to alcohol. I wasn't, an alcoholic, but it did seem as though one of the things that the Iboga did was zero in on kind of obsessive, unconscious behavior patterns and show you kind of the roots of that behavior and why you would be better off to change it, And I think that's what we see a lot in the reports we're getting from heroin addicts and coke addicts who go through the Iboga addiction therapy. And I don't think that it means that Iboga is necessarily a cure for addiction. It's certainly not, but it's a very powerful and original kind of treatment tool. And I think it also indicates, how the class of psychedelics can work as a help for mental disorders and addiction patterns more generally. Then towards the end of that phase, I was shown some little hints about the future. Kind of, at one point there was this kind of rebus-like puzzle that reassembled to these words that said, "Touchers teach too." And I mentioned that in the first book, Breaking Open the Head, and by the second book, 2012, I sort of got an answer for what that meant for me. And it did seem like a very helpful kind of sign. When I went through that experience, I'd come from a psychomaterialist background. I was highly skeptical. I had no particular interest in psychic phenomena or belief in psychic phenomena. Although I was clearly looking for some kind of spiritual dimension or other levels of consciousness. But I had so many experiences during the initiation and afterwards that indicated that there was more going on in the cosmos than I had ever accepted or allowed myself to imagine. And for instance, we did a second ceremony with these other shamans, and one of these shamans ate a bunch of Iboga. There was this huge, very powerful-looking black guy. His eyes were like bright, and he said through. They spoke French and their native language. We had translators who translated what they said. But anyway, he said that when he was looking at me, he saw the spirit of my mother's mother hovering over me, and he said that she had died very recently, and because she loved me very much and was very possessive, she was protecting me. She was overprotecting me. She was stopping me from entering into and seeing different aspects of the visionary worlds. And for me, it was very startling that he said this, because my mother's mother had in fact died within the last year, and she was quite anxious and overprotective, and I could actually imagine her kind of hovering around me, stopping me from having these other kind of visionary experiences. I hadn't spoken to anybody about my personal background in that sense. I'll talk about also my second Iboga experience in Mexico when I do the longer stay. Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.